Hello there everyone, my name is Neil Sinababu, and for e-learning week here at the National University of Singapore, I'm going to give you a lecture on Hume's views concerning motivation. I'm going to first lay out the general kind of view he's going to defend, and then I'm going to lay out three different arguments he gives for it. You could probably find more arguments in the treatise if you wanted for his view of motivation, but I'll focus on the three that sort of leap out at me the most in our reading. So what's Hume's view? Well, you can see it in the first paragraph of our reading, section 233 of the Influencing Motives of the Will. And here Hume talks about how lots of people talk about the combat of passion and reason, think reason is better, and that men are only so far virtuous as they conform themselves to its dictates. But Hume disagrees with all this. Hume says at the end of that paragraph that he will endeavor to prove first that reason alone can never be a motive to any action of the will, and secondly that it can never oppose passion in the direction of the will. Hume is arguing for a psychological thesis that reason by itself doesn't motivate us to action. It takes passion for us to be moved to action, and reason can't motivate us by itself. Now, what arguments does Hume give for this? Well, you can see the first argument that he gives starting on the paragraph immediately following, the second paragraph of section 233. And I have here a sheet that will lay out this argument for you, and I will move it towards the camera so that you can see this, and there we go. So I'll hold it here so you can pause and look at it more if you want. But here's how I see the argument going. Premise 1, he says, the understanding it exerts itself after two different ways, as it judges from demonstration. That is, basically mathematical proof or probability, scientific reasoning. And Hume says, well, this demonstration way doesn't really prove, well, you can use that to prove stuff, but you can't act from it. Who would assert that this first species of reasoning alone causes action? It just relates ideas to each other, gives you mathematical proofs and stuff like that. It doesn't directly motivate us. Now, I'll put this down and just talk the rest of the way so you can see my face instead of the paper. What Hume is saying there is, in some cases we do sometimes get mathematical reasoning that influences our action. He gives the example of the merchant who wants to figure out how much money perhaps to bring to the marketplace to pay off debts and buy things he needs. And sometimes you use math for that. But if you do that, what motivates you in the end to act is some passion related to the mathematical reasoning you do. The math itself isn't what by itself moves you to act. Maybe knowing that you owe somebody money will get you to bring enough money to pay them back or run away from them or something like that. But then what's motivating you really is your passion to pay your debts, your desire to do so. Or perhaps what's making you run away from them is not the math that tells you you owe them money, but that you don't want to get in trouble with them at this moment, so you escape. That's why Hume thinks that demonstrative reasoning doesn't cause any action. Now, why not probabilistic reasoning? Maybe scientific reasoning causes action, but Hume thinks that, again, this kind of reasoning doesn't cause action by itself, and there's premise 3. It can never in the least concern us to know that such objects are causes and others effects, if both the causes and the effects be indifferent to us. So, for example, medical science might teach us lots of things that we then act on. It might teach us that certain things cure diseases, and that other things end up causing diseases of some kind. And of course, that's going to shape how we act. But the reason it shapes how we act is that we have particular passions. We want to be healthy and not sick, and so we're moved. Hume, in his previous work in the treatise, has divided the kind of reasoning we do into these two types. Reasoning from mathematical things, reasoning by demonstration, and scientific kinds of reasoning, reasoning by probability. And Hume says neither of those are by themselves enough to cause action. So premise 1 was, here are the two ways you reason. Premise 2 was, the first way doesn't cause action. Premise 2 was, the second way doesn't cause action. Conclusion, reason doesn't motivate action. And how could it oppose passion in the direction of the will unless it had the kind of force that's required to motivate action? So that's what Hume's conclusion is. Now, you might argue against Hume. Hume, you're telling us that there are only these two types of reasoning. But I think, you might say as the objector to Hume, there's yet another kind of reasoning. Practical reasoning. Why couldn't there be another kind of reasoning? And that kind of reasoning is the kind of reasoning that tells us this is what should be done, and then we go from understanding by reason this is what should be done to doing it. You might say, Hume, why can't that happen? And you might even say, it seems like sometimes that does happen. Sometimes I have a feeling of obligation to pay my debts, and it doesn't feel like passions always do. I just feel, I've got to go pay debts to this guy. It's not like being hungry or thirsty or having sexual lust or anything like that. It's just this really kind of less, I guess, emotionally forceful feeling that, no, this is just what I'm supposed to do, so I'm going to go do it. It doesn't make me salivate or give me any of the bodily feelings of passion or anything like that. This is just reason motivating me. So Hume's second argument is to try to respond to that kind of criticism and explain why it is that passion itself couldn't motivate. And let me give you Hume's second argument. Here we go. Again, you can pause it if you want to freeze the argument on the screen at some point. There we go, that's good. And this concerns the nature of the passions. Hume says, a passion is an original existence, or if you will, modification of existence, and contains not any representative quality which renders it a copy of any other existence or modification. So what Hume is saying there is, what are our passions? Well, they don't seem to be things that represent the world as being a certain way. When you are hungry, it's not like your hunger is representing the world as being a certain way so that if the world isn't that way, your hunger would be false or something like that. Your beliefs can be false if they inaccurately represent the world. If you think there is food somewhere and there isn't, your belief is false. But hunger itself doesn't seem like the kind of thing that can be false. Maybe hunger can be misguided in some way. Maybe if you are hungry for something and it's not good. But false? It doesn't seem like hunger is trying to say that's how the world is. Beliefs do that, but passions don't really do that. Passions motivate you to do things that affect the world in a certain way. They don't seem to describe the world. Which brings us to the second premise of Hume's argument. Nothing can be contrary to truth or reason except what has a reference to it. And the judgments of our understanding only have that reference. So passions can be contrary to reason only so far as they're accompanied with some judgment or opinion. Well, let me just start with the beginning of that. Nothing can be contrary to truth or reason except what has a reference to it. Hume thinks that the only things that can be true or false, or only things that try to describe the world, are things that our reason can handle. Reason doesn't deal with things that don't try to describe the world. Reason just compares things to the world to see if they're true, and compares their representative properties to each other to see what we should derive from them. So if you believe that there's food somewhere, and you get perceptual states that tell you, no, there's really no food over there, in that case what's going to happen is your reason will tell you, time to revise that belief. It's not correctly representing the world. But that's all reason does. It does that, and maybe if you think that there is food over there, you can derive the belief that there's food somewhere. It can deal with these kinds of representations that aspire to truth. But where there aren't representations that aspire to truth, reason doesn't really do anything. And since the passions don't represent the world, reason can't really handle them. Reason doesn't do anything with them. And so reason can't oppose them. It can only shut down beliefs that don't match our experiences, or that seem to be false, or contradict other beliefs we have. That's what reason does. It doesn't do these things with the passions. And so you get the conclusion. Reason alone can never be a motive to any action of the will, and can never oppose passion in the direction of the will.